Thank you, Julian. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you, Orgestralt. And I apologize a lot for my German because I don't speak German at all, even if I was there several, like a lot of times. I also apologize. I will not have PowerPoint for the presentation. So if you have any question or if I speak too quick or if anything, don't hesitate to chat or to say something. I will be glad to precise what I say or yeah, to explain more or to say again the date or the name in French or in English. Just to present me a bit. So yeah, as Julian said, I'm working for the Réseau Sortir du nucléaire. It's a French federation of association. We like it exists since the end of the 80s, and actually like for now we federate around 300 association, and we are a national organization, but we like our main goal is to help all the local association to fight against nuclear energy. And we have also national fight like juridical actions through the media's mobilization, etc., etc. We are fighting at several levels. And in my, yeah, and as Julian say, I'm working a bit of my job is to work on international issues, and I'm also a spokesperson and I'm a media relation officer. So I work at several levels. Yeah, I don't know if you need if you need me to precise more who I am. Well, if you have question about my background, don't hesitate, but I think it's not the main topic of today. So to present you a bit what I want to speak about tonight, I want to I will make a short presentation of the revival of French nuclear industry in France. And even if we cannot say the whole phase out, a real phase out of nuclear industry in France, but we are facing a revival since 2022, and I will present it a bit in the text and in the reality, and I will show how it's quite different what our government say and what it is in reality. I will, and in a second part, I will speak about how France is actually lobbying to promote nuclear industry at a European level to get investment, but also like to get money for its own nuclear industry, but also to promote new projects around Europe. And I would like to finish with some action in reaction, even if it's not enough to totally fight against nuclear energy in France and in Europe. People are reacting, and we are trying to help them as much as we can. So I wanted to finish on this small or not as small action we are promoting and organizing. Is there any question for now? Is it clear?
I think let's go.
Okay. So to begin, so France, as I think you know, is a very nuclear country. 70% of our electricity is coming from nuclear industry. And since 2022, in 2022, Emmanuel Macron pronounced a discours, le discours de Belfort, the Belfort speech. And in its discourse, he announced he wanted to build 6 new EPR2, EPR like means European pressurized reactors, and the EPR2 it's a model, a simplified model of EPR. It doesn't exist anymore at all at the moment, but it's inspired by the EPR model. And so in 2022, Emmanuel Macron announced he will like not he, but like is volunteered to build in France new reactors, 6 new, and to make plan to build 8 more, but also small modular reactors, technology that doesn't exist in France and few in the world. To make it clear, you have to imagine that in France, the last nuclear reactor connected to the grid was the reactor of Civaux. I can write it if needed in 2002. And the last one we have in construction is Flamanville, the EPR of Flamanville. And it's maybe you heard about it because it's a very, very old um, reactor in construction because it began in 27, and it's not it's finished, but it's not connected to the grid. It has to be connected to the grid in 1 month if everything worked out. Something we still doubt, but it's the plan of EDF, the Électricité de France, the national company in charge of the electricity production in France. I don't know if it can help maybe if I write all the EDF pair or not. I don't know if it's needed.
I think I'm kind of capturing them, so I could put them in the chat while you speak if
Okay.
needed. Yeah.
Because I will repeat it a lot, like, and I don't know, like I will say EDF, and in French it's quite easy for me, and it makes more sense to say EDF than Électricité de France, or I don't know how it could be in French. So this discourse, this speech of Belfort is important because it's a big change in the national politic in France because Emmanuel Macron came just after just after Hollande, François Hollande, a socialist president who wanted to phase out nuclear in France. It the only thing Hollande allowed was the end of Fessenheim nuclear reactor in France, and also laws that aim to phase out nuclear industry, but it had no consequence because Macron changed it very quickly. And to understand why Emmanuel, it's important to understand for us as anti-nuclear organization. It's very important to focus on why now it's important for Emmanuel Macron. Like what are the reasons to make this revival of nuclear industry in France? And the arguments Macron is always repeating through every speech he made is that for him, nuclear industry will be the solution for the climate emergency. Sorry. So he's promoting nuclear as a decarbonized energy, but also renewable. So in his speech, he makes the promotion of energy transition, and the energy transition for him will be possible with new nuclear power plants, with renewable, with energy efficiency and energy conservation. This is for the discourse, for the speech, and we will see what really happened. One of and the other arguments of Emmanuel Macron are the sovereignty, like the independence of France, the idea of, it's a very national idea. It's the idea of that France is very powerful with its nuclear power plants, and it helps us to be independent. Something also very, very wrong if you want to say more about it. It's also possible. Like I can explain more, but it's a liar. And maybe the last argument he used is in industrial revival, like the idea of creating a new industry and to create jobs and economy, etc., etc. So this is for the speech, and this is for all we are always hearing for our government. In the reality, for now, it has a few consequences, but some of them are already real. What we observe since its speech is a big like it's like what we observe are two things. The first was the idea, the desire of simplifying a lot of things. Like one of the arguments of the government to explain why it's complicated to build new nuclear power plants in France is that it's too complicated for example, at an administrative level. So, to answer this important issue in terms of our government, they voted a law in May 2023, la loi d'accélération du nucléaire, the Nuclear Acceleration Law, with the idea of simplify the administrative problems they figure out, they thought there was, and to simplify administrative procedures to build more quickly a nuclear power plant. So it means for us, our analysis is that it means less safety because one of the consequences was that EDF now needs less administrative, how to say, administrative étape or papers or to build a nuclear power plant. And for us, this administrative papers and everything are important for the safety in general. And other thing we have to emphasize is that this law was voted exactly during the public consultation about if the French people wanted or not a new nuclear power plant in France. So it was like, in terms of democracy, it was really, really bad for us. And yeah, and it's something like this is something we always see, but it's always a bit terrible to see it again. We have also another law, not already voted, but in discussion, still in consultation, like in discussion, because there is a lot of opposition. It's a law to reorganize our safety organization. The aim of the law is to merge our two nuclear safety institutions, the ASN, l'Agence de sûreté nucléaire, the Nuclear Safety Agency, and the IRSN, l'Institut de recherche en sûreté nucléaire, the Institute for Research on Nuclear Safety. The idea is to merge both institutions to have just one. It's still with the goal. Well, the government announced that for them the idea of the goal of the law is to simplify again. But for us, it's and for us, and not just for us, for all the employed of the ISN and the IRSN, it's a danger for our safety, and it's not a good idea to make it just now, like in a context of revival of nuclear industry in France. And yeah, so in the reality, we have these two laws voted or in the or in discussion, And in the reality, what we also observe is that for now, the EPR2 are just a dream. They are not exactly designed, and they are already late. That's something we not discovered. Well, we discovered it in the medias, but it was a public announcement. But we heard that in February, the basic design of the first EPR2 is already 1 year late. So the building construction is not already late, but the basic design is like the basic design is the first design, and then we have the detailed design, and they are late. They are late in comparison with what they expected. So for us, it's always a good news. For them, it's not good news, but for us, it was like, okay, the first delay of nuclear industry in France, as we could observe it in Flamanville. And the reality is also that the 6 EPR2 will cost a lot. And recently, EDF announced it will cost 30% more than the last evaluation. And the last evaluation was already like 30% more than the first evaluation of the cost. And this cost is not the last cost, because it doesn't take into account a lot of things, like, for example, the cost of the capital, or the cost the ground. Like EDF still need more superficie to build like they need more superficie for their building, and this cost is not in the final cost they announced. So it's not a final cost. And the actual cost is 67.4 billion euros for 6 EPR2. And however, like, we have this context, but however, all the bad news we heard about nuclear industry in France, Emmanuel Macron and EDF are promoting a lot nuclear French industry and energy in Europe and in the world. And are actively lobbying to get, like, at least to get European funds and to promote nuclear industry in Europe. So is there any question or something, or I can pass to the second part maybe of the speech?
Let's go.
Yeah, okay. Okay. So what we saw since 2022 is at the same time as a promotion in France of nuclear industry in France, but also a very strong promotion in Europe. For example, France is now leading the European Alliance of Nuclear Energy, an alliance of pro-nuclear countries, or other who are not exactly pro-nuclear, but they could be interested in get nuclear power plants in their country. And some other countries are just invited. It depends of their meeting. One of these meeting gathered, for instance, to make it clear, Bulgaria, Croatia, Estonia, Finlandia, Hungary, Netherlands, Polonia, Czech Republic, Romania, Belgium also was present, Slovakia, Sweden, and also Italy and England were invited. And this alliance of European Alliance of Nuclear Energy allows them to share information about nuclear. For France, it's really a big deal to like to promote how they are strong to build nuclear power plants. And every time they met, it's also it also produced public declaration about how it's important for them to build new nuclear power plants, and etc. etc. And with always a lot of medias sharing this announcement, etc. etc. They also like these countries, I'm not sure if all these countries, there was also 20 countries in the COP28 in Dubai, which announced they will triple the nuclear capacity production within 2050. And it was very interesting to notice that it was an announcement, like they wanted to triple the nuclear capacity production, but it was also the occasion to ask for financial support to the international banks, and it was a call for capital to build this very important technology. And for us, it's important because for us, it's a clear signal that they are asking for money. Like, it's very complicated in France to, like, we have to get it very clear that nuclear industry in France is financed just by public funds, and they are looking for more funds because it costs a lot, and it's very complicated to get private funds, because it's not an energy that, like, it's not an industry, how to say, well, it's very complicated to get private funds, so they are asking for more and more money. They also repeated this message during the Nuclear Energy Summit organized in March the 21 in Brussels. It was a summit organized by the International Atomic Energy Agency and welcomed by the Belgian Prime Minister. And it was like during this meeting, again, they share information. There was a lot of conferences, speeches, and again, the public announcement of how nuclear industry will save the world and the climate and blah, 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 and how it's important to finance this important industry. This is for public announcements, presence in the medias, attempt to gather a lot of countries around this objective, and more specifically and concretely, France is pushing, but really strongly, the European negotiation about development of renewable energy, as we could see, and it was highlighted in the media as how to say, how it was strange, like, because concretely France blocked the red third, the renewable energy directive third, a directive that aimed to promote and to improve the goal of renewable energy development in Europe. And France blocked the negotiation to get the possibility to inscribe nuclear as a technology, as a decarbonized energy that could get European funds at the same level of renewable energy as solar and wind. So it shocked a bit because France blocked the negotiation with also the gas production countries. So it was a bit I don't know what to say, but yeah, it was a bit shocking. Even for non anti-nuclear activists. And it's interest. So in a way, like in one hand, we have France promoting nuclear industry for its own industry and to get money for its project of building for building new EPR2 in France. But in another hand, we can observe that France is actively trying, or at least trying to sell its technology through Europe. So recently, we could observe that at least EDF is now dealing with 8 European countries to sell their nuclear reactors, and they recently announced that their goal is to build 1 or 1.5 nuclear reactor per year since 2030. Something we EDF didn't wasn't able to do like this a lot of decades ago. So that's like a new and big and a bit unrealistic goal, but it's an official announcement from EDF. And this is interesting because in Brussels, in this nuclear summit, Macron explains a bit why it's important for France and for EDF to sell this technology to Europe, because he explained to the media, that the EPR2 are a new technology, and the idea of EDF and of its and of our it's difficult for me to say my government, but yeah, it's the French government at least, is that they aim to build a lot of EPR2 to reduce the cost, because like they aim to build it at an industrial level. So the more they will build, the less it will cost. So that's why they are also trying to sell it through Europe. So there is an economical objective goal, and it's very clear. Like Macron announced it through the media, so it's clear. It's clear. So it's more or less the context of what France is developing through Europe and in France, and it's clear, and I will not lie. It's a complicated situation. Like it's a really, really, really strong revival of nuclear industry in France, with a lot of support, and also the support of half, like according to some how to say, inquest, sondage, like
yeah, surveys, Umfragen auf
surveys.
Deutsch.
Yeah, surveys. According to some surveys, there is like half percent of the population, the French population, that supports the construction of new nuclear power plants, and this is something.
0.5, yes?
50%.
50%. Okay.
Yeah.
So a lot.
So a lot. It's a small majority, but it's a majority, and it's the first time in a lot of time we see this result of a survey. So yeah, so the situation is quite bad for anti-nuclear activists in France, but they are still fighting, and it's interesting to like, there is still a lot of people fighting, and I wanted to emphasize a bit some action they I say they, but we as Sortir du Nucléaire, we support them, but it's like, and we organize some stuff on our own, but it's like I prefer to say anti-nuclear activists, to focus on all the people that are organizing a lot of things, and yeah. And so recently in October, for example, we participate in organizing 20 small actions through France to emphasize the problem of contamination of nuclear industry in France. There will be other regional action in April on the topic of the risk of accident and all the safety problems of nuclear industry. Very recently, there was I always 1,000, yeah, mil, 1,000 a person in Flamanville,
At
in
the
Caen, in
construction
Normandy,
site.
in the north of France, during a strike against the Flamanville EPR. And it was like, it was like for us, it was a big mobilization because there is a lot of time we do not have a big mobilization, like with buses coming from other countries and everything. There is also people fighting against the project CGO, like I think I will not have the word in English to explain it. So I will search it and then I can explain it again. And also, we took part to an international mobilization in Brussels against the nuclear industry, the nuclear energy summit, with a lot of, like, we were 30 people, but representing at least 40 international organizations, and it was a quiet, happy mobilization because it was with well, I can show you a photo. I can I can try to share my screen if I get it. But the idea was to denounce how nuclear industry is a liar and it's a fairy tale. So it was interesting for us to does it work or not? You share. I think I will not. Yeah, okay, it will work. Does it
Oh,
work?
coming up. You might need to confirm something. There we go. The nuclear fairy tales. And
So
that
the
was in
idea was,
Brussels last month.
yeah, it was in Brussels last month, and the idea was yeah, to make something a bit funny because we are always like focusing on what it's a very dangerous industry and what it's terrible, etc., etc. And we wanted to say that it's a fairy tale. It's not the response to the climate crisis. It's not the response to anything. And it was interesting because we also get 600 organization sign on a declaration, a common declaration against nuclear industry, and they came they came from all around the world. So it was interesting to make something small but representing a lot. And at the same time, Greenpeace was blocking the energy summit, the nuclear energy summit. So it was interesting to get a civil kind of action. And so what I maybe to conclude, well, there is also other action, like we are making things at a juridical level or more. I can develop it later, but maybe in conclusion, we are facing a big issue, and it's very complicated for us um, to fight against it in the context of in a context when climate crisis is a biggest issue for French people and also for young people, and clearly we are facing we are not a lot, and young people are not as anti-nuclear or as the older generation, but the fact that we will maybe face a new new nuclear reactor building in France is making the opposition grow, and new energy are coming. So it's a really interesting context, and yes, I hope we we can all face this problem together. And I can finish with that.